Triggers, we all have them. You know those moments that push our buttons and send us spiraling? You feel it like pounding out of your chest, your palms are sweaty, or maybe you feel rage bubbling over. You could be somebody who completely freezes and is unable to react. I don't know, but what I do know is that triggers are never comfortable. That said, triggers are also one of the greatest gifts when it comes to healing and our personal development. Triggers can be some of the best gifts and opportunities for growth if we allow them to be. In today's episode, I'm going to show you why facing your triggers is an underrated superpower and give you some tips on how you can start. Before we get started, I do want to acknowledge that triggers are broad and can come from some really traumatic events. Unfortunately, I know that a lot of us have been through some really heavy things, so I don't want to minimize or trivialize that. Some triggers can produce debilitating responses for some people, and in those cases, I would encourage you to engage the help of a medical professional like a therapist or psychiatrist. I'm neither one of those things. I'm a life coach and I am trauma informed, but some things, quite frankly, are just outside of my scope. So I want to be responsible and make sure that you know that it is absolutely okay to seek support from resources outside of what this podcast episode can provide. That said, I think even in those extreme circumstances that there is so much power in being able to work through those triggers, but you just might need a little bit of extra help and that is okay. So let's get started because triggers are your friend and I'm about to show you why. Welcome back to the On Some Real Shift podcast. I'm your host, Vanessa, a certified life coach, mindset transformation coach, neuro-linguistic practitioner, Reiki and sound bath healer, but most importantly, I am a student of the university. Welcome back to our first real episode. I am excited. I decided to come in hot for this one because triggers are never fun to talk about, but they are such an underrated superpower, like I've already said. I think we should start by defining what triggers are. Count how many times I'm going to say trigger in this episode. Oh my gosh. And sorry, I am congested right now. So if you hear me sniffling and breathing hard and it's annoying to you, I'm so sorry. I have whatever germs are floating around right now. Okay. But anyway, triggers. So what are they? Triggers are anything that kind of instantly throws your nervous system and your emotions out of whack, out of regulation. It usually produces a physiological response. It's not a comfortable feeling. It could be a word, it could be a smell, a person, place, or thing, just a memory. Like I said, the spectrum is broad. They usually stem from past experiences, even as far back as childhood. They can come from, societal expectations. They don't come from anywhere fun. What happens is these experiences start to create a belief system within our minds and our bodies that is deeply ingrained in us and is often unconscious. If you haven't already, I highly recommend that you read the book, The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk. He talks about the impact of trauma on the body and the nervous system and how our body literally keeps trauma stored within our DNA, within our cells, which in turn can lead to chronic illness, anxiety, depression, and how these traumas absolutely affect our ability to develop healthy relationships, whether they're platonic or romantic. He talks about how trauma is stored within our nervous system and how this can manifest in different ways like insomnia, chronic illness, pain, and again, things like anxiety, depression. So it's not just all in your head, it's in your body too. What happens when we're triggered is our body tends to react before our mind has a moment to process even what's going on. So here's the thing. Like I said, triggers are oftentimes looked at extremely negatively. And, even when you go on the internet, you always see trigger warning. And I get it. A lot of times this is because there's some really disgusting and heinous things on the internet and people should have an informed decision on whether they want to expose themselves to these things. But I notice that we censor our vocabulary a lot. And I'm not here to diminish it for anybody, but sometimes I wonder if that's even being helpful, because the truth is triggers offer a direct view into our subconscious about where some of our deepest fears and insecurities are. They say, hey girl, I'm a flashing light. This area needs attention. This area still needs healing, and that is okay. That we can use to our benefit. It's like saying something important is happening here, and it's up to us to take a step back and identify what that is. So I want you to think about the last time that you were triggered and start asking yourself some questions. Ask yourself, what would this have looked like if I did not react impulsively? And listen, this is not a judgment because, like I said, oftentimes our bodies react before our mind has a moment to fully process what the hell is going on. Ask yourself, what were the emotions that you were feeling? What are the thoughts that were racing through your mind? How did your body feel? And start being mindful, start being present and understanding how you're feeling in those moments. Then is question the validity of those feelings. Feelings are not facts. For me, journaling is incredibly helpful, especially when I'm reflecting on something. I know it doesn't seem practical because most people aren't walking around with a journal and thinking in the moment of getting triggered, oh, time to pull my journal out. Let me walk through this. But I think it's a helpful exercise if you can take a moment and revisit the last time or some of the last times you were triggered. What happens is once you start doing this more regularly, you can kind of take a look. It tells you a story. Write down your thoughts and your feelings. What is it that happened to make you feel triggered or that elicited this emotional or physiological response from you? And once you start doing this, what this does is it really provides kind of a clearer picture. You can start identifying patterns of what types of scenarios cause what types of responses. And then you can start questioning whether you are really safe in those instances. Because a lot of times when we are reacting to a trigger, it's because we're not feeling safe in that situation. And I don't always mean physically safe. Sometimes I just mean emotionally. Once you start to understand the root of your triggers, you can then start questioning their validity. Ask yourself, is the way I am feeling or the way I was feeling around this particular event actually true? Are these beliefs accurate? Are they serving me? Oftentimes we hang on to beliefs that are not serving us just because we've been conditioned to do so. And that's something that NLP has taught me, and I'll get into that in another episode. A lot of time we exacerbate the situations because then we start engaging in this negative self-talk and ruminating and start feeding the beast. We start feeding this thought and that might not even have any truth to it. Once you start writing these down and being a little bit more mindful about how you're feeling and why when you get triggered, then you can start reflecting on your past experiences and try and connect where they may have come from. Like I said, when you start writing it down, it's oftentimes like a storybook that kind of leads you to how you got there in the first place. So step one is identifying and understanding your traumas, really peeling back the layers and getting real and not being afraid to kind of dissect them and understand, well, how am I feeling? Step two is developing coping mechanisms for working through your triggers. Mindfulness and meditation are key. You don't need anything or anybody but yourself. Honestly, I'm not the best at meditating. I'm still working on it, and I know it's not a competition, but I still have trouble with my mind racing everywhere. So for me, I like to practice mindfulness breathing techniques. 4-7-8 is like the simple one. I'll walk you through it. What you do is you breathe in through your nose for 4 seconds. You hold it for 7 seconds. And then you breathe out forcefully for 8 seconds and you make kind of like a whoosh sound. I'm going to try and do it on here, but I'm sick, so I don't know how this is going to go. All right, so breathe in for 4 seconds. Hold it for 7. And breathe out for 8. My breath ran out. But you get the idea. And this really helps kind of bring you back into the present moment because you start focusing on your breath. So it's like my favorite technique. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. Also, taking slow, deep breaths can really significantly help regulate your nervous system and calm anxiety too. So that's an easy one. Another way to move through triggers is through grounding. And there are tons of ways to do it. So there's one where you can just focus in on your body. For instance, I'm sitting in this chair, and if I want to ground, I would focus on where my feet meet the ground, right? And I'll clench my fists and release. Clench my fists and release. You're putting the focus on you and your body. Or another way to ground yourself is to pay attention to your surroundings. Notice 4 things that you can see, 3 things that you can hear, 2 things that you can smell, and 1 thing that you can taste, right? What that's doing is bringing your focus right back here to your world right now. Coping statements or affirming statements are also great. One of my favorite coping statements that I like to tell myself is feelings are not facts, this feeling will pass. Feelings are not facts, this feeling will pass. I also like to tell myself I am safe, I am safe, I am safe. Grounding techniques just help you feel more present in the moment. And you don't have to just use them when you're triggered, right? You can just use them when you start to sense yourself just feeling overwhelmed, stressed, anxious. Like they're really great techniques. And again, We possess the tools that we need to heal ourselves all in here. The third step in moving through your triggers is challenge your negative beliefs. Start to reframe your thoughts, right? It's called cognitive restructuring. Challenge your negative beliefs with positive and affirming thoughts that are real, that are realistic. This is where you ask yourself, are these negative beliefs even serving me? And if not, ask yourself, then why am I holding on to them? Like I said, feelings are not facts. And so once we start to identify, just because I feel a particular way doesn't mean that that is the truth that I'm telling myself, you're able to kind of distance yourself and take a more objective look and say, okay, maybe I'm a lot more safer in this situation than I thought. Now, a key to challenging these negative beliefs is doing it with compassion. Negative self-talk, we don't have space for that here. Which now rolls into step number 4, which is use this trigger as an opportunity for growth. As I mentioned at the beginning of the show, triggers are an opportunity for us to see where we have gaps, where we still need healing. And I get it, this episode was very high level because it really does take a lot of peeling back the layers of the onion. Every situation that needs healing requires different work. I didn't say it was going to be easy, but I did say it was going to be worth it. This is where you start to learn to use triggers as a way to practice self-compassion, engage in self-care, and use your coping mechanisms. I promise you, once you start getting in the habit of identifying the trigger, developing a coping mechanism, and then challenging those beliefs, slowly but surely your body is going to get in the habit of slowing down and questioning if this danger that we're perceiving is legitimate. What happens when you start facing these triggers, you start to develop emotional resilience. And isn't that why we're here? You start to learn to better manage your reactions. And then in turn, you develop the ability to navigate these challenges with more ease. It just takes practice, just like anything else. Like I said, this is just a general framework because everybody's triggers are different and some require more attention and care than others. But I do believe that this formula can be applicable to nearly any situation. Some situations just might involve a little bit of a deeper dive, and that's okay. I'm going to give you like a hypothetical example on how you would apply this 4-step process. So let's create a person. We're going to name them Chewy, okay? Okay, so Chewy gets a lot of anxiety anytime his boss criticizes his work, even if it's constructive, right? This triggers feelings of inadequacy or that he's a failure, really coming from his childhood when his father would be so hypercritical of him. He notices that his palms get sweaty, his heart starts racing, he even starts to tear up, right? And he figures this out because he's journaling to track these experiences and track these responses. Are you with me? Chewy then starts to reflect on his past and starts thinking about all the times his father would be hypercritical, right? And he starts to realize that this hypercriticism had a profound effect on his self-esteem. So then he sees that there's a pattern between his reaction to criticism from his boss, even if it's constructive, even if it's fine. So then he starts to notice a pattern or see a connection between his father's criticism when he was a kid and his reaction to any feedback that he gets from his boss at work. Step 2, Chewy starts to do all the breathing exercises that we talked about, right? The 4-7-8 method, for instance, the deep breathing. Also, Chewy starts meditating before he goes to work, just for like 5 minutes a day. He's like grooving. He's like, okay, I think I'm able to get through this. Now it's time for me to challenge my beliefs, right? How does he do that? He shifts the narrative from I'm not good enough to reminding himself of all of his past achievements and the things that he has absolutely accomplished and has to be proud of. He starts reframing his boss's feedback as an opportunity for growth rather than a personal attack. So now Chewy's ready for step 4. And he starts to use these triggers for an opportunity for growth. He uses the trigger as a signal to practice what? Self-compassion and engage in the calming techniques that we talked about. He starts to develop emotional resilience because he is now becoming more in control of his reactions, right? Because he's being more mindful about them ahead of time. And in turn, he gradually becomes more confident and assertive in his work. And now Chewy's able to step back and develop a greater understanding of how he might react to potential situations and kind of get ahead of them the next time. If we spend our energy ignoring these triggers, ignoring the ways that our body, our mind, our heart is signaling to us that there's pain here, there's unaddressed pain here, there's unaddressed insecurity here, then it is impossible to ever move past it. And then what happens is we're constantly then at the mercy of the world, right? Because we're constantly reacting instead of proactively managing our reactions. And listen, it takes time because we know cognitively way sooner than our body does, right? So it's going to feel uncomfortable the first 5, 10, 15, 20 times that you work through your triggers. but I promise it does get easier. I embrace my triggers because, like I said, it tells me where I still have work to do. And then it forces me to challenge that negative belief. And 9 times out of 10, that negative belief is false. And what that does is that just lightens the load in my heart and my spirit, and it helps me feel better about myself. We carry a lot of these negative narratives that aren't really real. Avoiding the hard stuff doesn't make it go away. So yeah, I hope you found that helpful. Anything that I come on here and talk to you all about is nothing that I haven't done or don't practice on a regular basis. Like I always say, I'm not here to talk at you. I'm just here to help. I appreciate your time. Tune in next time for the On Some Real Shift podcast. Please subscribe, follow, all the things. If you have questions, drop them in the comments, and I will see you next week. Peace.